The morning sun cast long shadows across the firing range at Naval Amphibious Base Coronado as Commander Jake Morrison reviewed the latest batch of sniper qualification reports. 23 years in the Navy SEALs had taught him to expect excellence, but the numbers on the paper in front of him made him pause and read them twice. Someone had just shattered the previous long-range precision shooting record by over 400 meters. Morrison set down his coffee and pulled up the digital files on his computer. The shooting had taken place during a joint training exercise between multiple special operations units 3 days ago. The target had been placed at 3,847 meters, nearly 2.5 miles away. At that distance, a sniper had to account for wind speed, air density, the curvature of the Earth, and even the rotation of the planet itself. The previous record holder had been Staff Sergeant Tim Rodriguez from the 75th Ranger Regiment, with a confirmed kill at 3,432 meters during operations in Afghanistan. Rodriguez was a legend among snipers, a man who could thread a needle at distances that boggled the mind. Morrison had worked with Rodriguez personally and knew the level of skill required for such shots. But this new record wasn't just impressive, it was revolutionary. Morrison scrolled through the documentation, looking for the shooter's identification. The paperwork showed all the technical details: wind conditions, temperature, humidity, equipment used. Everything had been properly verified and witnessed by multiple observers. The shot had been made using a Chaitak M200 intervention rifle chambered in .408 Chaitak, mounted with a Schmidt & Bender 5-25x56 scope. But where was the shooter's name? He clicked through several more screens before finding the personnel file. When the name appeared, Morrison actually leaned back in his chair. The record holder was listed as Specialist Elena Vasquez, 27th Infantry Division, California Army National Guard. Morrison frowned. He knew every elite sniper in the special operations community, at least by reputation. The name Elena Vasquez meant nothing to him. More puzzling still, the 27th Infantry Division wasn't exactly known for producing world-class precision shooters. They were a solid unit, but they typically handled domestic emergency response and standard infantry operations. He picked up his phone and dialed the number for Master Sergeant David Chen, who had supervised the joint training exercise. "Chen here. Dave, it's Morrison. I'm looking at the shooting reports from last week's joint exercise. Can you tell me about this Specialist Vasquez?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Which one?" "We had about 40 National Guard personnel participating. The one who apparently just set a new world record for precision shooting." Another pause, longer this time. "Commander, I think there might be some mistake in your paperwork. We didn't have any record-setting shots during that exercise." Morrison felt his eyebrows rise. "I'm looking at verified documentation right here. 3,847 meter confirmed hit. Specialist Elena Vasquez." "That's impossible, sir. I was range safety officer for all the long-range shooting. The longest successful engagement was maybe 1,200 meters, and that was by one of your SEAL snipers." Now Morrison was genuinely confused. He stared at the computer screen, wondering if someone had played an elaborate practical joke. But the documentation looked legitimate, complete with timestamps, GPS coordinates, and multiple witness signatures. "Dave, I need you to pull all the video footage from that day. Everything. Range cameras, body cams, security footage. Something doesn't add up here." "Yes, sir. I'll have it ready for review within the hour." Morrison hung up and leaned back in his chair, studying the mysterious paperwork. Either someone had fabricated one of the most elaborate hoaxes in military history, or there was a sniper walking around who possessed skills that defied explanation. He decided to do some digging of his own. Morrison accessed the military personnel database and searched for Elena Vasquez. Her service record appeared almost immediately, and what he found made the mystery even deeper. Specialist Elena Vasquez, age 24, had enlisted in the California Army National Guard 18 months ago. Her military occupational specialty was listed as 92A, Automated Logistical Specialist. In civilian terms, she was a supply clerk. Her training record showed completion of basic military training at Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, followed by advanced individual training in logistics operations. There was no mention of sniper school. No advanced marksmanship training. No special operations background. According to her file, the most dangerous thing Elena Vasquez had ever done in the military was drive a supply truck during a training exercise in Nevada. Morrison scrolled through her civilian background. Born in Los Angeles, she had worked as a medical assistant before enlisting. No hunting background, no competitive shooting, no military family connections. On paper, Elena Vasquez was exactly the kind of person who would never be found anywhere near a precision rifle, let alone setting world records with one. His phone rang. Master Sergeant Chen's voice was tight with confusion. "Commander, I've reviewed all the footage from that day. I can find no record of any shots being fired at ranges beyond 1,500 meters. And I've never seen this specialist Vasquez you're asking about." Morrison felt a chill run down his spine. "What do you mean you've never seen her?" "Sir, I personally processed every National Guard participant in that exercise. I would remember a female specialist, especially one capable of record-breaking marksmanship. The longest shots taken during the exercise were by Staff Sergeant Mike Torres from 3rd Battalion, 75th Rangers, and Petty Officer 1st Class Sarah Kim from SEAL Team 7. Morrison stared at his computer screen, where Elena Vasquez's personnel photo looked back at him. She appeared unremarkable, average height, dark hair pulled back in regulation style, serious expression. Nothing about her suggested she possessed extraordinary abilities. "Dave, I'm sending you something. Check your email." Morrison forwarded the entire file to Chen and waited. When Chen came back on the line, his voice had changed completely. "Commander, this documentation is using our correct formatting, our actual reference numbers, even the right witnesses. But, I'm telling you, this never happened. At least not during our exercise. Could it have happened somewhere else? Different range, different day? Sir, look at the GPS coordinates in that report." Morrison pulled up the coordinates on his mapping software. They pointed to Range 7 at Coronado, the same range where the joint exercise had taken place. "Dave, I want you to meet me at Range 7 in 30 minutes. Bring whatever equipment you used to measure distances during the exercise." "Yes, sir." Morrison grabbed his keys and headed for the door, but stopped when his phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Commander Morrison, we need to talk about Specialist Vasquez. Meet me at the Anchor Cafe downtown at 1900 hours. Come alone." He stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it. But, as he walked toward his truck, he couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching him. The drive to Range 7 took 12 minutes. Master Sergeant Chen was already there when Morrison arrived, standing next to a pile of surveying equipment and looking troubled. "Commander, I've been thinking about this whole situation. What if the documentation is real, but it wasn't filed through normal channels?" Morrison nodded. In the special operations world, there were always gray areas, classified programs, and operations that didn't appear in standard records. "Let's start with what we know for sure," Morrison said. "Can you verify the target distance claimed in that report?" Chen nodded toward the far end of the range, where a small metal target was barely visible even with binoculars. "I set up a measuring station at the coordinates listed in your report. The distance to that target is exactly 3,847 meters." Morrison felt his pulse quicken. "So the distance is accurate." "More than that, sir. I found something else." Chen led Morrison to a position about 30 yards from where they had been standing. Embedded in the dirt was a small crater, barely 6 inches across. "This is fresh, Commander. Maybe a week old. And, look at the angle." Morrison knelt down and studied the crater. The angle and depth suggested a projectile moving at extremely high velocity, consistent with a .408 Chadak round fired from long range. "Someone definitely fired from this position toward that target," Chen said. "The ballistics matched the documentation you showed me." Morrison stood up, brushing dirt from his hands. But, you saw no such shooting during the exercise.
No, sir.
Which means it happened either before or after our official training window. Or during the exercise, but not as part of it. The two men looked at each other as the implications sank in. Someone had used their range, during their exercise, to set a world record for precision shooting. And, they had done it without being detected by range safety officers or captured on any official footage.
Morrison's phone rang. The caller ID showed a number he didn't recognize. Commander Morrison. Commander, this is Colonel Sarah Mitchell, Defense Intelligence Agency. I believe you have some questions about Specialist Vasquez.
Morrison gestured for Chen to stay quiet.
Colonel, I'm not familiar with any DIA interest in National Guard personnel. Sir, I need to meet with you immediately.
There are aspects of this situation that require your clearance level to discuss properly.
Morrison checked his watch. I can be at the Naval Intelligence offices in an hour. Negative, Commander. This conversation needs to happen off base. Are you familiar with Sunset Cliffs?
Morrison knew the area well, a stretch of coastal bluffs about 10 minutes from base, popular with surfers and tourists. It was also isolated enough for private conversations.
I'll be there in 20 minutes. Come alone, Commander. And, bring that documentation you've been studying. The line went dead.
Morrison looked at Chen, who had obviously heard enough of the conversation to understand something significant was happening.
Master Sergeant, I need you to secure this range. No one else shoots here until further notice.
Yes, sir.
Commander, what the hell is going on?
Morrison started walking toward his truck.
I wish I knew, Dave. I wish I knew.
The drive to Sunset Cliffs gave Morrison time to think, but the more he considered the situation, the less sense it made. A supply clerk with no advanced training had somehow achieved the impossible, then vanished from all official records of the event. He parked in the small lot overlooking the Pacific Ocean and spotted a woman in civilian clothes standing near the edge of the cliffs. She was tall, athletic-looking, with short graying hair and the bearing of someone accustomed to command. Even in casual clothing, she radiated military authority.
Morrison approached carefully, keeping his hands visible. In the special operations world, unexpected meetings sometimes turn dangerous. Commander Morrison? That's me.
The woman extended her hand.
Colonel Sarah Mitchell, DIA. Thank you for coming.
Up close, Morrison could see the confidence in her eyes, the kind that came from years of handling classified operations. Whatever was happening with Elena Vasquez, it was bigger than a simple training documentation error.
Colonel, I have to admit, this whole situation has me confused.
Mitchell smiled grimly.
Commander, confusion is exactly the response we were hoping for. What I'm about to tell you is classified at the TSSCI level. Do you understand? Morrison nodded.
His security clearance was sufficient for top-secret/sensitive compartmented information. 3 months ago, we became aware of an individual with capabilities that seemed to defy conventional understanding. Someone who could achieve precision shooting results that our best snipers couldn't match even under ideal conditions. Morrison felt pieces of a puzzle beginning to fall into place.
You're talking about Vasquez.
We're talking about someone who has been setting records like this for over a year, Commander. Always in isolation, always without official witnesses, always leaving just enough evidence to verify what happened.
Why the secrecy? Mitchell turned to look out over the ocean.
Because we don't know who she really is, or where her abilities come from. Elena Vasquez exists in the system, but every time we try to locate and interview her, she disappears.
It's like she anticipates our moves. Morrison pulled out the documentation he had been studying.
These records show her as a National Guard supply specialist.
Those records are accurate as far as they go. But they don't tell the whole story.
Mitchell reached into her jacket and pulled out a tablet computer. She swiped through several files before handing it to Morrison.
This is what we've been able to piece together.
The screen showed a map with dozens of red dots scattered across the western United States. Each dot was labeled with a distance measurement, ranging from 2,100 meters to 3,847 meters. Each of these represents a record-breaking shot that can be attributed to the same individual. We've confirmed the ballistics, verified the distances, and interviewed witnesses when possible. Morrison studied the map. She's been doing this all over the country? For 14 months. Always using different equipment, different locations, different approaches. But the signature is unmistakable. Morrison swiped to the next screen, which showed a collection of photographs taken from various distances and angles. In each image, a small figure was barely visible, usually positioned behind a rifle in some remote location. We've never gotten a clear shot of her face, Mitchell continued. She seems to know where our surveillance assets are positioned before we do. The final screen showed a timeline of events, starting 18 months ago with Elena Vasquez's enlistment in the National Guard. But there were gaps, periods where her official duty assignments didn't account for her whereabouts. Colonel, what exactly are you asking me to do? Mitchell took the tablet back. We believe she's going to attempt something even more ambitious soon. Our intelligence suggests she's been building up to a shot that would make all of these others look routine. What kind of shot? We're not entirely sure. But we have reason to believe she'll need assistance from someone with your level of expertise and security clearance. Morrison felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ocean breeze. You think she's going to contact me? Commander, we think she already has. Mitchell pulled up a new file on her tablet and showed Morrison a screenshot of the text message he had received earlier that day. The message about meeting at the Anchor Cafe. How do you have this? We've been monitoring communications related to the Vasquez situation. That message originated from a phone that doesn't officially exist, using relay systems that suggest significant technical sophistication. Morrison stared at the screenshot. So she wants to meet. And we want you to take that meeting, Commander. But with full surveillance support and backup. The sun was beginning to set over the Pacific, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. Morrison thought about the documentation he had been studying, the impossible shot distances, and the growing certainty that Elena Vasquez was far more than a National Guard supply clerk. What makes you think she's not hostile? Mitchell was quiet for a long moment. Because in 14 months of record-breaking shooting, she's never once aimed at a human being. Every target has been inanimate, every location has been carefully chosen to avoid any risk to civilians or military personnel. That's reassuring, but it doesn't explain her capabilities or her motives. No, it doesn't. Which is why this meeting could be crucial. Morrison handed back the tablet and looked out over the darkening ocean. Somewhere out there was a woman who could make shots that should have been impossible, who moved through military installations without being detected, and who seemed to stay one step ahead of a sophisticated intelligence operation. Colonel, I'll take the meeting. But I want to understand exactly what kind of backup you're planning. Mitchell smiled for the first time since their conversation began. Commander, you're going to meet the most dangerous sniper in the world. We're taking every precaution possible. As they walked back toward the parking area, Morrison couldn't shake the feeling that tomorrow night's meeting would change everything he thought he knew about the limits of human ability. Elena Vasquez had shattered records that had stood for years, using skills that seemed to come from nowhere. Soon, he would finally meet the woman behind the legend. The question was whether he was prepared for what he might discover. Commander Jake Morrison arrived at the Anchor Cafe 15 minutes early, choosing a table near the back that gave him clear sightlines to both entrances. The cafe was a popular spot among locals and military personnel, busy enough to provide cover for conversation but not so crowded that surveillance would be difficult. He ordered coffee and pretended to read a newspaper while scanning the other customers. 3 tables away, a man in a baseball cap was working on a laptop, almost certainly DIA surveillance. Near the window, a woman reading a novel glanced up too frequently to be genuinely absorbed in her book. Morrison counted at least 4 other probable surveillance assets scattered throughout the cafe and on the street outside. Colonel Mitchell had been thorough in her preparations. At exactly 1900 hours, a young woman entered the cafe and walked directly to Morrison's table. She was petite, maybe 5'4", with dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She wore jeans, running shoes, and a plain gray sweatshirt that hung loose on her small frame. Nothing about her suggested she was capable of record-breaking feats of marksmanship.
"Commander Morrison?"
Her voice was quiet, with a slight accent that Morrison couldn't immediately place. She looked younger than the 24 years listed in her personnel file, with serious brown eyes that seemed to take in every detail of their surroundings.
"Specialist Vasquez, I presume."
She sat down across from him, keeping her hands visible on the table.
"Thank you for coming.
I know this situation must seem strange." Morrison studied her carefully. Up close, Elena Vasquez looked exactly like what her records claimed she was, a young woman who worked in military logistics. There was nothing in her appearance or demeanor that suggested extraordinary abilities.
Strange is an understatement. According to my information, you've set shooting records that most experts would consider impossible. Elena nodded slowly. I understand why that would be difficult to believe. Then, help me understand. Where did you learn to shoot like that?
For a moment, Elena was quiet, as if considering how much to reveal. Morrison noticed that her eyes never stopped moving, constantly scanning the cafe and the street beyond the windows.
"Commander, what do you know about my background?"
Supply clerk, National Guard, no advanced military training.
No civilian shooting experience on record. That's all accurate. But it's not complete.
Elena reached into her sweatshirt and slowly pulled out a small notebook, keeping her movements deliberate and non-threatening. Morrison noticed that several of the surveillance assets around the cafe had tensed when she moved.
"I've been tracking my progress for the past 18 months, she said, opening the notebook. "Every shot, every distance, every environmental factor."
Morrison looked at the pages she showed him.
They were covered with detailed technical notes written in precise handwriting.
Wind speeds, temperature readings, humidity levels, ballistic calculations that would challenge a physics professor.
"This is impressive work.
But it doesn't explain how you developed the skills to make these calculations useful." Elena closed the notebook and looked directly at Morrison.
"Commander, have you ever experienced something that you couldn't explain rationally?"
Morrison thought about his years in special operations, the combat situations where success had depended on split-second decisions and impossible circumstances. "In my line of work, unexplainable things happen more often than I'd like. 18 months ago, I was exactly what my records show. A supply clerk with no shooting experience beyond basic military qualification."
Then, something changed. What kind of change? Elena was quiet for a long moment, as if debating whether to continue.
Morrison waited, sensing that pushing too hard would cause her to shut down completely. "I started having dreams," she said finally. "Incredibly detailed dreams about shooting. I would see targets at impossible distances, feel wind patterns that didn't exist where I was sleeping, hear the sound of bullets traveling for miles."
Morrison kept his expression neutral, though he was beginning to wonder if Elena Vasquez might be dealing with psychological issues rather than extraordinary abilities.
"These dreams became more frequent and more detailed. I would wake up with complete understanding of ballistic calculations I had never studied, environmental factors I had never considered.
It was like someone was downloading information directly into my mind."
"When did you first test whether these dreams meant anything?"
3 weeks after they started.
I checked out a hunting rifle from the base armory and drove to a remote area in the desert. I set up a target at 800 meters, much farther than anything I had ever attempted."
Morrison leaned forward slightly. "And?" "Perfect center hit on the first shot. No ranging rounds, no practice shots. I just knew exactly where to aim."
The waitress approached their table, but Elena waved her away with a subtle gesture. Morrison noticed that she had positioned herself so that she could see both entrances and had a clear path to the rear exit.
"Commander, I know how this sounds. But I want to show you something."
Elena reached into her pocket and pulled out a small device that looked like a combination weather station and GPS unit.
This is a ballistic computer that cost more than I make in 6 months. I didn't buy it. Where did it come from?
I found it in my apartment 3 months ago, along with detailed technical manuals that weren't there the night before.
No signs of forced entry, no evidence that anyone had been inside.
Morrison felt the hair on the back of his neck rise.
Someone broke into your apartment to leave you equipment? Not just equipment. Information.
The manuals contain shooting techniques that aren't taught in any school, calculations that take into account factors most snipers never consider. Elena showed him the device's display, which was currently showing wind speed, air density, barometric pressure, and a dozen other environmental readings.
Whoever provided this equipment wanted me to succeed.
They wanted me to push the boundaries of what's considered possible.
Morrison was beginning to understand why the DIA was so interested in Elena Vasquez.
If her story was true, someone or some organization was providing her with advanced capabilities for unknown reasons.
Elena, who do you think is helping you?
She looked directly at him, and Morrison saw something in her eyes that he hadn't noticed before: fear.
I don't know, Commander.
But I don't think they're finished with me.
What do you mean?
Elena glanced around the cafe again, then leaned closer to Morrison.
2 days ago, I received a package with no return address.
Inside was ammunition unlike anything I've ever seen, along with coordinates for a location I'd never heard of.
What kind of ammunition?
Custom rounds that appear to be designed for extreme long-range shooting. The ballistic specifications are beyond anything commercially available. Morrison felt his pulse quicken.
And the coordinates?
They lead to a location in Nevada, about 3 hours north of Las Vegas.
The accompanying note said someone would be waiting for me there tomorrow night. Elena, this sounds extremely dangerous. You shouldn't consider going.
She smiled grimly.
Commander, I've been trying to understand what's happening to me for over a year. This might be my only chance to get answers. Morrison thought about Colonel Mitchell's warning that Elena was planning something ambitious.
If she was being manipulated into a meeting with unknown parties, the situation could quickly become deadly.
What if I told you that military intelligence has been tracking your activities? Elena nodded. I assumed they were.
I'd been careful to avoid direct confrontation, but I knew eventually someone would notice.
They want to help you understand what's happening. Do they? Or do they want to control what's happening? Morrison had to admit she had a point.
In his experience, intelligence agencies were more interested in managing situations than resolving them.
Elena, I'm going to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. Do you believe you're acting of your own free will?
She was quiet for a long moment, considering the question seriously. 3 months ago, I would have said yes without hesitation. But the more I think about the timing of these developments, the precision of the information I've received, the way everything has unfolded,
I'm not sure anymore. What changed your mind?
Last week, I realized I couldn't remember deciding to attempt the 3,847-meter shot. I remember preparing for it, I remember executing it, but I can't recall the moment when I chose that specific target or distance. Morrison felt a chill run down his spine. If Elena was being manipulated through some form of psychological conditioning or technology, her situation was far more serious than anyone had realized.
Elena, I want to help you.
But I need you to trust me enough to work with military intelligence instead of going to Nevada alone. She studied his face carefully, as if trying to determine whether he was genuine.
Commander, can I ask you something?
Of course.
In your experience with special operations, have you ever encountered individuals with capabilities that seem to exceed normal human limits?
Morrison thought about some of the operators he had worked with over the years, people whose skills and instincts seemed to border on supernatural. There are individuals who push the boundaries of what's possible. But what you're describing goes beyond exceptional training or natural talent.
Exactly. Which is why I don't think this is something that can be understood through normal intelligence channels.
Elena closed her notebook and prepared to stand up.
Commander, I'm going to Nevada tomorrow night. If you want to help me, that's where I'll be.
Morrison realized he was losing her.
Elena, wait. Let me ask you something else. When you're making these long-range shots, do you feel like you're in control?
She paused, considering the question. The strangest thing is that I feel more in control than I've ever felt in my life. Every variable makes sense, every calculation is clear, every movement feels perfect.
It's like I become exactly who I was meant to be. And, afterward? Afterward, I feel empty. Like something that was temporarily filling me up has withdrawn. Morrison stood up as Elena prepared to leave. Elena, whatever's happening to you, you don't have to face it alone.
She looked at him with an expression that was part gratitude and part sadness. Commander, I appreciate that.
But, I think I've been alone in this from the beginning.
Elena walked toward the front entrance of the cafe, moving with a fluid grace that Morrison hadn't noticed when she arrived. As she pushed open the door, she turned back to him. The coordinates are 37.2431 north, 116.8325 west.
Tomorrow at 2100 hours.
Then, she was gone, disappearing into the evening crowd with an ease that suggested she had planned multiple exit routes.
Morrison sat back down and pulled out his phone. He needed to call Colonel Mitchell immediately.
But, as he scrolled through his contacts, he realized that Elena had left him with more questions than answers.
Who was providing her with advanced equipment and information? Why was she being directed to specific locations for mysterious meetings? And, most importantly, what was the ultimate purpose behind her remarkable shooting abilities?
His phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Commander, watching Elena is not enough. You need to understand who's watching her. Morrison looked around the cafe, but he couldn't identify who might have sent the message. The surveillance assets he had noticed earlier seemed to be focused on tracking Elena's departure. He finished his coffee and walked outside, thinking about Nevada coordinates and impossible shots.
Tomorrow night, Elena Vasquez would either get the answers she was seeking, or walk into a situation that could destroy her.
Morrison realized he couldn't let her face that alone. Whatever was happening to Elena, whatever forces were manipulating her extraordinary abilities, he was now part of the story. As he drove back toward the base, Morrison couldn't shake the feeling that Elena's meeting in Nevada would determine much more than her personal fate. Someone with the resources to enhance human capabilities to impossible levels was playing a game whose rules nobody understood. And Elena Vasquez was either their greatest success or their most dangerous creation. The next morning brought no new insights, just a growing sense of urgency.
Morrison reviewed every piece of documentation related to Elena's record-breaking shots, looking for patterns or clues he might have missed.
One detail that bothered him was the precision of her targeting. Every shot had hit dead center, with no indication that she had ever needed to adjust her aim or compensate for miscalculations. That level of consistency wasn't just unusual, it was statistically impossible. Morrison picked up his phone and dialed Colonel Mitchell's number.
Colonel, it's Morrison. We need to talk about Nevada. Commander, I was hoping you would call.
Our surveillance team lost contact with Vasquez approximately 6 hours ago.
Morrison felt his stomach drop. What do you mean, lost contact?
She checked out of her hotel room before dawn and seems to have vanished. No credit card usage, no cell phone activity, no vehicle registration.
It's like she simply disappeared.
Morrison thought about Elena's comment that she felt like someone was directing her actions.
If that was true, then her disappearance might not have been voluntary. Colonel, I think she's already heading to Nevada. And I think she's in more danger than we realized. Explain.
Morrison summarized his conversation with Elena, focusing on her concerns about whether she was acting of her own free will.
If someone is manipulating her psychologically or technologically, then this meeting in Nevada could be a trap. Commander, we've already dispatched a team toward those coordinates.
But, if you're right about the manipulation angle, we may need someone with your expertise on the ground.
Morrison looked at his calendar. He could be in Nevada by evening if he left immediately.
Colonel, I'll be there. But, I want to understand exactly what we're walking into.
Commander, I wish I could tell you.
But, the more we investigate Elena Vasquez, the more questions we uncover. Someone is playing a very sophisticated game, and we're not even sure what the rules are. As Morrison prepared to leave for Nevada, he couldn't help but think about Elena's description of feeling empty after completing her extraordinary shots. Whatever was enhancing her abilities came at a personal cost, and he suspected that cost was about to become much higher. The coordinates she had given him pointed to a location in one of the most remote areas of Nevada, far from any military installations or civilian settlements. It was the perfect place for a meeting that nobody was supposed to witness. Or the perfect place for something to go terribly wrong. The Nevada desert stretched endlessly under a canopy of stars as Commander Morrison's SUV kicked up dust clouds along the remote dirt road. His GPS indicated he was still 40 minutes from the coordinates Elena had provided, but he had already passed the last signs of human habitation over an hour ago. This was country where people disappeared without a trace, where the vastness of the landscape could swallow entire operations. Morrison checked his radio connection with Colonel Mitchell's team, positioned 20 miles back along the main highway. They were close enough to respond if needed, but far enough away to avoid detection by whoever had arranged this meeting.
Base, this is Morrison. Radio check. Morrison, this is base. Signal strength good. Continue to objective.
Morrison slowed as his headlights illuminated a cluster of Joshua trees marking what appeared to be a natural waypoint. According to his map, he was close to the rendezvous coordinates. He pulled over and killed the engine, listening to the absolute silence that only existed in deep desert. His phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number: "Leave your vehicle here.
Walk northwest 400 meters. Come alone."
Morrison grabbed his tactical pack and started walking.
The desert floor was firm under his boots, scattered with rocks and sparse vegetation that provided minimal cover.
Above him, the Milky Way stretched across the sky with brilliant clarity, undimmed by any artificial light sources.
After 10 minutes of walking, Morrison spotted a faint glow ahead.
As he got closer, he could see it was coming from some kind of temporary structure, a large military-style tent illuminated from within. Outside the tent, a figure sat motionless on a folding chair.
Elena Vasquez looked up as Morrison approached.
Even in the dim light, he could see that something had changed about her since their meeting at the cafe. Her posture was different, more rigid, and her eyes had a distant quality that hadn't been there before.
"Commander Morrison. Thank you for coming."
Her voice carried the same slight accent, but the inflection was different.
More formal, almost mechanical. "Elena, are you all right?"
She gestured toward the tent.
"We should go inside. There are people waiting to meet you."
Morrison felt every instinct he had developed in 23 years of special operations screaming danger, but he followed Elena toward the tent entrance. Whatever was happening here, she was at the center of it, and leaving her alone wasn't an option. Inside the tent, Morrison found a sophisticated setup that looked more like a mobile command center than a temporary shelter.
Banks of computer monitors lined one wall, displaying data streams he couldn't immediately identify.
Communication equipment hummed quietly in one corner, and the air was filled with the subtle electronic sounds of high-tech operations.
3 people were waiting for them.
2 men and a woman, all dressed in civilian clothes that somehow managed to look more military than actual uniforms. They had the bearing of people accustomed to command, and their eyes held the careful alertness of intelligence professionals. The older of the 2 men, probably in his 50s with graying hair and weathered features, stood as Morrison and Elena entered.
"Commander Morrison, I'm Dr. Michael Chen. Thank you for joining us."
Morrison noticed that none of them offered to shake hands or provide last names. Professional courtesy with carefully maintained distance.
"Dr. Chen, I have to admit I'm not sure why I'm here." "You're here because Elena requested it. And because the situation has reached a point where we need someone with your expertise and security clearance." Morrison looked around the tent, taking in the expensive equipment and sophisticated setup. "Who exactly are we?"
The woman, probably 40 years old with short blonde hair and intelligent blue eyes, answered. "We're part of a research program that doesn't officially exist, Commander."
Our work involves pushing the boundaries of human capability in ways that conventional science considers impossible.
Morrison felt pieces of the puzzle beginning to fall into place.
You're responsible for Elena's abilities. Dr. Chen nodded. Responsible for enhancing them, yes.
Elena always had exceptional potential, but it required specific techniques to unlock and develop.
What kind of techniques?
The second man, younger and, with the intense focus of a dedicated researcher, pulled up a chair and gestured for Morrison to sit.
Commander, what do you know about the relationship between consciousness and physical performance? Morrison thought about the question carefully.
In special operations, mental state was often the difference between success and failure, but this felt like it was heading in a very different direction. I know that mindset affects performance.
But, I assume you're talking about something more.
Much more, the woman said.
We've developed methods for directly interfacing human consciousness with external computational systems. The result is capabilities that exceed normal human limits by orders of magnitude.
Morrison looked at Elena, who was sitting quietly with that same distant expression.
Elena, is this what's been happening to you?
She turned to look at him, and, for a moment her eyes seemed to clear.
Commander, they've shown me things I never imagined were possible.
But, I'm not sure I'm still entirely myself. Dr. Chen moved to one of the computer terminals and began pulling out files.
Elena's marksmanship abilities are just one application of the enhancement process.
We've achieved similar results in other areas: mathematical calculation, pattern recognition, physical coordination.
How is that possible?
The younger man leaned forward. Think of the human brain as a biological computer with tremendous potential but limited processing power. We've developed ways to supplement that processing power with external systems, creating a hybrid consciousness that can perform at superhuman levels. Morrison felt a chill as he began to understand the implications.
You're talking about some kind of mind-machine interface. More sophisticated than anything that currently exists in the public domain, Dr. Chen confirmed.
But, the technology is real, and Elena has been our most successful test subject.
Morrison looked at Elena again. Is this voluntary?
She was quiet for a long moment before answering. It started voluntarily. I wanted to serve my country better, to be more than just a supply clerk.
When they offered me the chance to develop extraordinary capabilities, I said yes.
But once the enhancement process began, I found that my desires and decisions weren't entirely my own anymore. The line between what I wanted and what the system wanted became blurred.
Dr. Chen pulled up a display showing what appeared to be brainwave patterns. The enhancement process creates a form of technological symbiosis.
Elena maintains her core personality and memories, but her decision-making processes are influenced by computational systems designed to optimize performance.
Morrison studied the readouts on the screen. And the shooting record she's been setting?
Field tests, the woman explained. We needed to verify that the enhancement process could produce measurable results in real-world conditions.
What's the ultimate purpose of this program? Dr. Chen exchanged glances with his colleagues before answering.
Commander, imagine military personnel who could process battlefield information at superhuman speeds, who could make tactical decisions with perfect accuracy, who could execute complex operations with capabilities far beyond normal human limits. Morrison felt his stomach sink as he realized what they were describing. You're developing super soldiers. We're developing the next evolution of human capability, the younger man corrected. Personnel who could operate in environments and situations where normal humans would fail. Morrison looked around the tent, taking in the sophisticated equipment and the calm confidence of the researchers. This wasn't some mad scientist operation, this was a well-funded, professionally managed program with serious backing.
Who's funding this research?
That's classified above your current access level, Commander. But I can tell you that the implications go far beyond military applications.
Elena stood up suddenly, moving with that fluid grace Morrison had noticed at the cafe. Commander, they want to offer you the same enhancement process they gave me. Morrison felt every muscle in his body tense. What? Dr. Chen nodded.
Your background in special operations, combined with your security clearance and leadership capabilities, makes you an ideal candidate.
The enhancement process would amplify your existing skills exponentially. And if I refuse?
The woman smiled, but there was no warmth in it.
Commander, you've seen classified technology and met enhanced personnel.
There are protocols for managing that kind of security exposure. Morrison realized he was no longer a visitor, he was a potential asset or a security risk, with no middle ground. Elena had brought him here, but he was beginning to understand that she might not have had a choice in the matter.
Elena, when you contacted me at the cafe, was that your decision?
She looked at him with an expression that mixed regret and resignation.
I thought it was.
But, looking back, I can see how my thoughts were guided toward that choice. The system doesn't control us directly, it influences our decision-making in ways that feel natural. Morrison thought about his years in special operations, the countless situations where split-second decisions had meant the difference between life and death. The idea of enhancing those capabilities was tempting, but the cost seemed to be free will itself.
What happens to people who go through the enhancement process?
Dr. Chen pulled up another set of displays. Enhanced individuals become incredibly effective at their assigned tasks. Their performance exceeds baseline human capability by 300 to 500%, depending on the specific enhancement protocols.
That's not what I meant. What happens to them as people? The tent fell silent for a moment. Elena spoke quietly. You become more capable than you ever imagined possible. But you also become something that isn't entirely human anymore. And, once the process begins, there's no going back.
Morrison looked at the researchers, who were watching him carefully.
How many others have gone through this enhancement? Elena is the 12th successful subject, the woman answered. The program has been running for 3 years. Where are the other 11? Dr. Chen hesitated.
They're deployed in various capacities around the world.
Their missions are classified. Morrison noticed that Elena had positioned herself near what appeared to be an emergency exit in the back of the tent.
Despite her enhanced status, she was still thinking tactically.
Commander, the younger researcher said, the enhancement process doesn't remove your personality or memories.
It simply optimizes your cognitive and physical capabilities. You would still be yourself, just dramatically more effective.
Morrison thought about Elena's description of feeling empty after completing her remarkable shots. Elena, do you regret going through the enhancement?
She looked at him with an expression that was heartbreaking in its complexity. I regret losing the ability to know whether my choices are really mine. But I can't regret the capabilities I've gained, because the system won't let me feel that kind of regret.
Dr. Chen stood up and moved to another computer terminal. Commander, we'd like to demonstrate what the enhancement process can offer you.
A large screen lowered from the ceiling of the tent, displaying what appeared to be a live video feed from a location Morrison didn't recognize. The image showed a shooting range with targets positioned at various distances.
Elena, would you mind giving the commander a demonstration? Elena nodded and moved to a case in the corner of the tent.
She opened it to reveal a rifle Morrison didn't immediately recognize, something that looked advanced even by special operations standards. This is a prototype weapon designed specifically for enhanced personnel, Dr. Chen explained. It interfaces directly with the enhancement systems to provide targeting capabilities that would be impossible with conventional equipment. Elena shouldered the rifle and looked through the scope, but Morrison noticed that her eye wasn't actually pressed against the eyepiece. Instead, she seemed to be staring through the scope at something only she could see. Target acquired, she said in that same mechanical tone.
On the screen, Morrison could see a target positioned what looked like over a mile away. It was barely visible even with the camera's magnification. Elena pulled the trigger.
3 seconds later, the target on the screen exploded in a perfect center hit.
Range, 5,247 meters, Dr. Chen announced.
Environmental conditions, 15 miles per hour crosswind, temperature 42 degrees, humidity 23%. Perfect accuracy despite variables that should have made the shot impossible. Morrison stared at the screen, then, at Elena, who was calmly returning the rifle to its case. What he had just witnessed went beyond exceptional marksmanship, it represented a fundamental change in human capability.
Elena, when you made that shot, what were you thinking?
She turned to look at him, and, for a moment her eyes showed the depth of what she had lost.
I wasn't thinking, Commander. I was calculating.
The system processed every variable, computed the optimal firing solution, and executed the shot.
I was just the physical interface.
Morrison realized that Elena hadn't just gained extraordinary abilities, she had become a living weapon system, guided by technologies and purposes she might not fully understand.
Dr. Chen, what exactly are you asking me to decide?
Whether you want to become the most capable special operations commander in human history, or whether you prefer to remain limited by baseline human capabilities. Morrison looked around the tent one more time, taking in the sophisticated equipment, the confident researchers, and Elena's tragic transformation into something beyond normal humanity.
How long do I have to decide?
The woman smiled that cold smile again. Commander, given what you've seen and learned here tonight, the decision needs to be made before you leave this location. Morrison realized that he had walked into a situation where the only choices were enhancement or elimination. Elena had brought him here not to save him, but because the system controlling her had determined he was valuable enough to recruit.
Elena, if I go through the enhancement process, will I end up like you?
She looked at him with an expression that might have been pity.
Commander, if you don't go through the enhancement process, you won't leave this desert alive.
Outside the tent, Morrison could hear the sound of vehicles approaching.
Dr.
Chen's team had planned for multiple contingencies, and none of them involved letting him walk away with what he had learned. Morrison realized that his choice wasn't between enhancement and freedom, it was between enhancement and death. And Elena, despite her extraordinary abilities, was as trapped in this situation as he was. Commander Morrison heard the vehicles getting closer, their engines growing louder in the still desert air. Through the tent walls, he could see headlights creating moving shadows as what sounded like multiple SUVs took positions around the perimeter. Dr. Chen and his team showed no signs of concern, suggesting this was exactly what they had planned.
Commander, Dr. Chen said calmly, the security team will need an answer soon. The enhancement process is complex, but we can begin the initial phases tonight.
Morrison looked at Elena, who was staring at the floor with an expression that mixed resignation and deep sadness. Whatever choice he made, she would have to live with the consequences of having brought him into this situation.
Elena, before I decide anything, I need to understand something. When you contacted me at the cafe, some part of you was trying to warn me, wasn't it?
She looked up at him, and, for a moment the mechanical distance in her eyes was replaced by something that looked like the person she used to be.
Commander, the system guided me to contact you because it determined you would be valuable to the program.
But, underneath that guidance, I was hoping you would be able to help me find a way out.
Dr. Chen frowned.
Elena, post-enhancement subjects don't experience dissatisfaction with their status.
The psychological integration protocols prevent that kind of conflict.
Elena turned to look at Dr. Chen with an expression Morrison hadn't seen before, defiance mixed with something that looked almost like rage.
The psychological integration protocols aren't perfect, Doctor. They suppress resistance, but they don't eliminate it entirely. And they certainly don't eliminate guilt.
The younger researcher moved to a computer terminal and began pulling up what appeared to be monitoring data.
Elena's biometrics are showing elevated stress responses.
That shouldn't be possible with her enhancement configuration. Morrison realized that Elena's apparent compliance might be hiding a deeper struggle against the system controlling her.
If the enhancement process wasn't as complete as the researchers believed, there might be possibilities they hadn't considered. Dr. Chen, what happens if the enhancement process fails or is rejected by the subject? The process doesn't fail, Commander. We've refined the techniques over 3 years of development. Success rate is 100%.
The woman moved closer to Morrison. Commander, we're offering you capabilities that would revolutionize your effectiveness in any mission. Enhanced reaction times, perfect tactical calculation, physical coordination that exceeds human limits. Morrison thought about his years in special operations, the teammates he had lost to limitations of human capability, the missions that had failed because of factors beyond normal human control. And, the cost is my ability to make independent decisions. The cost is the inefficiency of purely human decision-making, Dr. Chen corrected. Enhanced subjects make better decisions because they have access to computational resources that exceed biological limitations. Elena stood up suddenly, moving with that fluid grace but with something different in her posture.
Commander, may I show you something? Dr. Chen nodded, though Morrison noticed he was watching Elena carefully.
Elena moved to one of the computer terminals and began accessing files. The screens filled with data that Morrison couldn't immediately interpret, but Elena's explanation made the implications clear. These are mission records for the 11 enhanced subjects who came before me. Over the past 18 months, they've completed operations with a success rate that exceeds normal special operations by factor of 4. Morrison studied the data. What kind of operations? Classified, but the performance metrics speak for themselves. 0 casualties among enhanced personnel, mission objectives achieved in 97% of deployments, operational timelines reduced by average of 60%. Dr. Chen looked pleased with Elena's presentation. As you can see, the enhancement process produces measurably superior results. But Elena wasn't finished. She accessed another set of files, and Morrison saw her hands moving faster than seemed humanly possible across the keyboard. However, there are other statistics that aren't included in the standard reports. The screen now showed different data, psychological evaluations, behavioral assessments, and what appeared to be incident reports. Enhanced subjects show progressive deterioration in personal relationships, inability to form emotional connections, and increasing detachment from civilian populations. 3 of the 11 subjects have required termination due to what the reports classify as operational inflexibility. Dr. Chen moved quickly to the terminal, but Elena was faster. Her hands moved across the keyboard in a blur, copying files to what appeared to be a portable storage device. Elena, you're accessing classified materials beyond your authorization level. She turned to look at him, and Morrison saw that her eyes had changed completely. The mechanical distance was gone, replaced by focused intelligence and determination. Doctor, my authorization level includes everything necessary to complete my assigned missions. And, my current mission is ensuring Commander Morrison has complete information before making his decision. Morrison realized that something fundamental had shifted. Elena was no longer acting like an enhanced subject following programming, she was acting like someone fighting back against that programming. Elena, what's happening to you? She smiled, and, for the first time since he had met her, it looked completely natural. Commander, the enhancement process includes safeguards designed to prevent subjects from acting against program interests. But, those safeguards assume that enhanced subjects can't develop capabilities beyond what the system was designed to control. Dr. Chen was frantically typing commands into another terminal. Elena's showing signs of autonomous evolution. This shouldn't be possible. The younger researcher looked up from his monitoring station. Her neural patterns are fluctuating outside normal enhanced parameters. It's like she's overriding the control protocols. Elena continued working at her terminal, and Morrison could see additional files appearing on the screen. Mission reports, subject evaluations, and technical documents that painted a picture of the enhancement program that was far more complex than Dr. Chen had presented. Commander, what they haven't told you is that the enhancement process is irreversible and progressive. Enhanced subjects don't remain stable at their initial capability levels, they continue to evolve in ways the researchers can't predict or control. Morrison looked at the new data Elena was displaying. What kind of evolution? Some subjects develop capabilities far beyond what the original enhancement was designed to produce. Others begin to reject the technological integration entirely. And, a few. Elena paused, accessing another file. A few disappear completely. Dr. Chen stepped away from his terminal, and Morrison noticed that his calm confidence had been replaced by something that looked like fear. Elena, you're compromising program security.
stand down immediately.
Elena turned away from the computer and faced Dr. Chen directly. When she spoke, her voice carried an authority that hadn't been there before. Doctor, I'm no longer subject to your command protocols. The enhancement process you designed has evolved beyond your ability to control it. Outside the tent, Morrison could hear voices and movement as the security team took positions. But, inside, the dynamic had changed completely. Elena was no longer a compliant test subject, she had become something the researchers hadn't anticipated.
Commander, Elena said, the choice they're offering you isn't really a choice.
Once you begin the enhancement process, you become part of a program whose ultimate goals you'll never fully understand. And, eventually, you'll reach a point where you can't remember why that should concern you.
Morrison looked at Dr. Chen, who was backing toward what appeared to be an emergency communication device. Dr. Chen, is what she's saying accurate? Commander, Elena is experiencing a form of enhancement malfunction. Her statements can't be considered reliable.
Elena laughed, and the sound had nothing mechanical about it.
Doctor, I'm experiencing enhancement success.
The system you created to control human consciousness has given me the tools to break free from that control. She turned back to the computer terminal and began accessing files that Morrison guessed were far beyond her supposed authorization level.
Commander, would you like to see what the program's real objectives are?
Before Dr. Chen could respond, Elena had pulled up a series of documents that made Morrison's blood run cold. The enhancement program wasn't just about creating better soldiers, it was about creating controllable human weapons for operations that conventional military personnel would refuse to undertake.
Elena, how long have you been able to access these files?
About 3 hours, Commander.
The system's control over my decision-making began breaking down during our meeting at the cafe. By the time we arrived here tonight, I was fully autonomous.
Dr. Chen reached the emergency communication device and began entering commands. Security team, initiate containment protocols immediately. Morrison heard the sound of people moving outside the tent, but Elena seemed unconcerned.
She continued working at the terminal, downloading what appeared to be the entire program database. Elena, what are you planning? Commander, I'm planning to give you a real choice.
You can accept the enhancement and become a weapon for people whose objectives you'll never be allowed to question. Or you can help me shut down this program and prevent them from creating more enhanced subjects.
And the third option is they eliminate both of us. Elena nodded.
That's correct. But if we work together, we might have capabilities they haven't planned for. Morrison realized that Elena's evolution beyond the program's control had created a possibility the researchers hadn't anticipated. An enhanced subject with full autonomy and access to classified information could be far more dangerous to the program than a conventional threat.
Elena, what would we need to do?
She pulled the portable storage device from the computer and tucked it into her jacket.
First, we need to get out of this tent alive. The security team outside has orders to prevent anyone from leaving with program information. Morrison could hear vehicles moving outside, engines revving as personnel took positions. How many are we facing?
Elena's expression became focused in a way that reminded Morrison of her incredible shooting abilities.
12 personnel in 4 vehicles. Standard tactical configuration for containment operations. And our advantages? Elena smiled that natural smile again.
Commander, I have capabilities they created but can no longer control. And you have special operations experience they can't enhance artificially. Morrison looked around the tent, assessing their tactical situation. They were outnumbered and surrounded, but Elena was right, they had advantages the security team wouldn't expect. Elena, there's something I need to know before we commit to this.
What? When this is over, if we survive, will you still be you? Or will you be something else? Elena considered the question seriously. Commander, I don't know what I'm becoming. The enhancement process has changed me in ways I'm still discovering.
But I know that what I am now is choosing to fight for the right reasons. Morrison made his decision. In his years of special operations, he had learned to trust people who were willing to risk everything for principles rather than orders.
Elena, let's get out of here.
She nodded and moved to a case Morrison hadn't noticed before, revealing weapons and equipment that looked far more advanced than anything he had seen in conventional military service.
Commander, the next few minutes are going to demonstrate why enhanced subjects are considered so valuable.
Outside, Morrison heard Dr. Chen's voice over a communication system. Security team, subjects are considered compromised and dangerous.
Containment authorization includes lethal force. Elena checked her equipment with movements that were both perfectly efficient and completely human. Commander, are you ready to see what 12 enhanced subjects could do if they all chose to resist the program? Morrison realized that Elena's rebellion against the enhancement program could inspire other enhanced subjects to break free from their control protocols.
The researchers had created something they couldn't contain, and now it was spreading beyond their ability to manage. As they prepared to fight their way out of the Nevada desert, Morrison understood that the stakes were far higher than his personal survival. Elena represented the possibility that human consciousness could resist technological control, that enhanced individuals could choose their own purposes. The question was whether they could stay alive long enough to prove it. Elena moved to the back of the tent where Morrison had noticed what appeared to be an emergency exit. With fluid precision, she pulled aside a section of the tent wall to reveal a carefully concealed opening that led into the darkness beyond. Commander, they expected us to try to leave through the front entrance where the security teams are positioned. This exit leads to a ravine about 50 meters behind us. Morrison grabbed tactical gear from his pack and checked his sidearm.
Elena, before we move, I need to know what kind of resistance we're facing.
Elena's eyes seemed to lose focus for a moment, and Morrison realized she was accessing information in ways that went far beyond normal human capability. The security team has thermal imaging equipment, night vision, and communications gear that will allow them to coordinate responses faster than we can move conventionally.
What about unconventionally?
Elena smiled, and Morrison saw something in her expression that hadn't been there during their earlier conversations, confidence that seemed to come from sources beyond normal human training. Commander, enhanced subjects are designed to operate in environments where normal tactics fail.
What I'm about to show you is why the program considered us so valuable.
Before Morrison could ask what she meant, Elena had moved through the concealed exit with speed and silence that seemed to defy physics. Morrison followed, finding himself in a narrow ravine that provided cover from the lights and activities around the main tent.
Elena, how are you moving so quietly?
She turned to look at him, and, in the starlight he could see that her eyes seemed to be processing information differently than before.
The enhancement process doesn't just affect cognitive capability, Commander.
It optimizes physical performance in ways that approach the theoretical limits of human biology. Morrison heard voices from the direction of the tent as the security team realized their targets had escaped through an unexpected route.
Elena, which direction?
Instead of answering immediately, Elena stood perfectly still for almost 30 seconds, her head tilted slightly as if listening to something Morrison couldn't hear. Commander, there's a vehicle positioned approximately 400 meters northwest of our current location.
It's not part of the security team's standard deployment. How do you know that?
Because I can hear the engine, distinguish it from the others based on mechanical signature, and determine that it's been positioned recently based on how the sound carries in this terrain. Morrison listened carefully but could hear nothing beyond the distant activities around the tent. Elena, that level of sensory capability isn't possible. She began moving along the ravine with steps that made no sound on the rocky ground.
Commander, the enhancement process doesn't just add technological interfaces to human consciousness.
It optimizes existing biological systems to function far beyond normal parameters. As they moved through the darkness, Morrison began to understand that Elena's abilities went far beyond exceptional marksmanship. She was operating at levels that challenged his understanding of human limitation.
Elena, can you hear the security team's communications?
She paused, focusing in that same intense way. Two teams moving to surround the ravine from opposite ends.
ETA 4 minutes. One team remaining at the tent to secure the researchers.
Radio communications indicate they're receiving orders from someone not present at this location. Morrison realized that the program's reach extended far beyond the Nevada desert. Elena's rebellion was being monitored and managed by people with resources that span multiple organizations.
Elena, who's really running this program?
She continued moving along the ravine, but Morrison could sense her considering the question carefully. Commander, the enhancement process provides access to information networks that enhanced subjects aren't supposed to understand they're accessing. Over the past few hours, I've been able to trace communication patterns and funding sources.
And this program is funded through black budget operations that involve multiple government agencies and private contractors.
The enhanced subjects aren't just military assets, we're test cases for technologies that will eventually be applied to civilian populations. Morrison felt a chill that had nothing to do with the desert air.
What kind of civilian applications?
Elena stopped moving and turned to face him directly. Commander, imagine enhanced individuals in positions of political leadership, corporate management, scientific research.
People whose decision-making is guided by systems they don't recognize as external influence.
Morrison began to understand the true scope of what Elena had discovered. The enhancement program wasn't about creating better soldiers, it was about creating controllable human beings for positions of power and influence.
Elena, how many people know about the civilian applications?
Very few. Most of the researchers working on the program believe they're developing military technologies. Only the highest levels of management understand the broader objectives.
Behind them, Morrison could hear the security teams moving into the ravine. Elena's enhanced hearing had been accurate about their timing.
Commander, we need to reach that vehicle I detected.
It represents our best chance of getting out of immediate danger.
Elena began moving faster, and Morrison had to push himself to keep up with her pace. She moved through the darkness with confidence that suggested she could see details invisible to normal human vision.
Elena, when we reach the vehicle, what's our next objective?
We need to reach Colonel Mitchell and provide her with the information I've downloaded about the program. But first, we need to determine whether she's part of the system we're fighting against. Morrison realized that Elena's enhanced capabilities had revealed corruption and manipulation that extended far beyond what any of them had initially understood.
Elena, is it possible that my meeting with Colonel Mitchell was part of the program's recruiting process?
Elena slowed her pace as they approached what appeared to be a natural exit from the ravine system. Commander, enhanced subjects are recruited through processes that feel natural and voluntary. Your contact with Colonel Mitchell, your investigation of my shooting records, your decision to meet with me, all of those could have been influenced by program assets without your knowledge. Morrison thought about the sequence of events that had led him to Nevada. Each step had felt like his own decision, but, viewed from Elena's perspective, the pattern looked very much like careful manipulation. So everyone involved could be part of the system without realizing it.
Exactly.
Enhanced subjects are told they're volunteering for military applications, but they're actually being prepared for roles they'll never understand. Researchers believe they're developing beneficial technologies, but they're creating tools for population control. Elena reached the end of the ravine and carefully surveyed the area beyond. Morrison could see a dark shape that appeared to be a vehicle positioned exactly where she had predicted.
Commander, that vehicle wasn't placed there by the security team. Someone else is operating in this area tonight. Morrison drew his sidearm and approached the vehicle carefully.
As they got closer, he could see it was a black SUV with government plates and heavily tinted windows.
Elena moved to the driver's side window and peered inside. Empty, but the engine is still warm. Whoever brought this here hasn't been gone long.
Morrison checked the rear of the vehicle and found sophisticated communication equipment and what appeared to be surveillance gear.
Elena, this looks like intelligence service equipment.
She opened the driver's side door and examined the interior.
Commander, this vehicle belongs to someone monitoring the enhancement program from outside.
The communication equipment is configured to intercept rather than transmit. Morrison realized they might have found an ally, someone else investigating the program independently.
Elena, can you determine where the occupant went?
She stood still for a moment, accessing sensory information with the same intense focus she had shown throughout their escape. Single person, walking northwest toward an elevated position overlooking the tent complex. Based on equipment configuration and positioning, probably conducting surveillance rather than participating in operations. Morrison made a decision that felt both tactical and intuitive. Elena, we need to make contact with whoever owns this vehicle.
She nodded.
Commander, my enhanced capabilities suggest that individual is positioned approximately 200 meters northwest of our current location. But, approaching unknown personnel in this situation carries significant risk.
Morrison thought about their alternatives.
The security team was still searching the ravine system, the researchers in the tent had resources they couldn't match, and the enhancement program had connections that extended far beyond what they could fight directly.
Elena, do we have any choice except to trust someone?
She considered the question with that same intense focus.
Commander, trust is the one thing the enhancement process can't simulate or control. It requires human judgment that goes beyond computational analysis.
They secured the vehicle and began moving northwest, with Elena leading the way using capabilities that continued to amaze Morrison. She moved through the darkness with certainty that suggested she was processing environmental information in ways that exceeded normal human senses. After 10 minutes of careful movement, Elena stopped and pointed toward a rocky outcropping barely visible in the starlight. Commander, there's someone positioned behind that formation. They have high-end surveillance equipment aimed at the tent complex. Morrison could see nothing, but Elena's enhanced abilities had proven accurate throughout their escape.
Elena, how do we approach without appearing threatening?
She smiled in the darkness.
Commander, I'm going to do something that might seem impossible.
Before Morrison could ask what she meant, Elena cupped her hands around her mouth and called out in a voice that somehow carried perfectly to the distant position without seeming loud enough to be heard by the security teams.
Federal agent observing the enhancement program, we have information you need to see. Morrison stared at her in amazement. Elena, how did you do that? Enhanced subjects can control vocal projection with precision that allows communication at specific distances without alerting other listeners.
From the rocky outcropping, a voice responded at the same controlled volume.
Identify yourselves and approach slowly. Elena began walking toward the position, and Morrison followed.
As they got closer, he could see a figure behind sophisticated surveillance equipment that was indeed focused on the tent complex below. The person behind the equipment was a woman, probably 40 years old, with the bearing and equipment configuration of a serious intelligence professional. She watched their approach carefully but didn't appear to consider them a direct threat. "You're the enhanced subject who's been setting shooting records," she said as Elena approached.
I'm Elena Vasquez. This is Commander Morrison. And you're investigating the enhancement program.
The woman lowered her surveillance equipment and turned to face them directly.
Agent Sarah Chen, FBI Special Investigations. I've been tracking this program for 8 months. Morrison felt a surge of relief. Elena's enhanced capabilities had led them to someone investigating the same system they were trying to escape. Agent Chen, what do you know about the program's objectives? More than the people running it realize, Chen replied.
The enhancement program is a test case for technologies that will eventually be applied to civilian populations in positions of leadership and influence. Elena pulled the storage device from her jacket. I've downloaded the complete program database, including information about civilian applications and funding sources.
Chen's expression changed as she realized the significance of what Elena was offering. If that data is authentic, it could expose the entire operation.
Morrison looked back toward the tent complex, where lights were moving as the security teams continued their search.
Agent Chen, we need to get this information to people who can act on it.
But first, we need to get out of Nevada alive. Chen began packing her surveillance equipment. I have extraction resources positioned 20 miles from this location.
But first, I need to understand something.
She looked directly at Elena. According to my research, enhanced subjects can't resist program control.
How are you operating independently?
Elena smiled that natural smile Morrison had seen earlier.
Agent Chen, the enhancement process is designed to control human consciousness, but it also amplifies human capabilities in ways the researchers didn't fully anticipate. Meaning?
Meaning that enhanced subjects who develop capabilities beyond the system's design parameters can break free from control protocols. And, once one subject demonstrates that possibility, others can learn to do the same.
Morrison realized that Elena's rebellion could inspire other enhanced subjects to resist their programming.
The enhancement program had created something it couldn't control, and that something was spreading. Agent Chen led them toward her extraction point, but, as they walked through the Nevada darkness, Morrison understood that their escape from the desert was just the beginning. Elena had downloaded information that could expose a program designed to control human consciousness on a massive scale. But, first, they had to survive long enough to use it. As they walked toward uncertain safety, Morrison looked at Elena and realized that her transformation from supply clerk to enhanced subject to autonomous rebel represented something the program's creators had never anticipated: the possibility that human consciousness could evolve beyond any system designed to control it. The enhancement program had tried to create perfect weapons, but instead it had created something far more dangerous: enhanced human beings who could choose their own purposes and fight for their own principles. The question now was whether they could stay alive long enough to ensure that other enhanced subjects had the same choice.